Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
So we were talking about the GZ curve. So today also we will be dealing about the GZ curve only. We saw what happens when a curve, when a body is shifted vertically in the ship. What happens to the GZ curve? Now let us take a look at some of the other properties of GZ curves, which are known as some simple models of stability. That is, first of all, let us draw a GZ curve. So you have a GZ curve, GZ versus phi. This is your GZ curve. Here you have a tangent that will give you the GM. Now, there is one other curve which is equally important to, as you know, this is GZ. GZ is the restoring arm. That is the arm that restores the ship back to its original position. Before we do that, there is another arm which will be acting, which is the arm or which is the moment that is tending to destabilize the ship. For example, the wind heeling arm. It is an example of an arm or the wind heeling moment. So the only difference between an arm and a moment is this. So this is the weight of the ship. Okay. So I'll be using the terms interchangeably, that is arm and moment. Both of them basically representing the same thing. The only difference is a constant weight of the ship. Now, let us take a look at the GZ curve and the heeling arm. So first, heeling. There are a couple of things that can produce heeling. One of them is the wind. It is the most predominant factor that produces heeling in the seas is wind. Wind causes the ship to heel like this in continuous fashion throughout its journey. So wind is one example. Then that's one of the another factors that you will see that produces heeling is the process of turning. For example, if you have a ship, okay, and if the ship is turning, it doesn't turn like this. When it turns and it heels. It heels. While it is turning, it heels. So when a ship is taking a turn, it produces some heel as well. So these are some of this too, and we have seen a lot of factors that produce heel, statical factors that produce heeling. That is, we saw the shifting of weights produces heeling. Shifting of weights horizontally produces heeling. Having a free surface effect produces heeling. Then having a pendulum, having a body hanging on some portion of the ship can produce a heeling. So all these can produce heeling. But right now we are focused on the dynamic features which produce heeling. They are basically the wind, turning, etc. These two are the main factors. So one, there is a heeling produced due to the wind that is acting, and two, there is a turning. So first of all, you should know that the turning moment, I am going to derive it in the next section, but before we do that, the heeling moment looks something like this. Actually, it should not be this high. This is a very high heeling moment. Let's not make it that high. So GZ, what am I writing? Heel. So that is angle phi, and then here GZ. And so the curve looks like this. Again, as I told you, this is the writing arm curve. Writing arm, which is GZ. Actually, you should remember that figure that we drew in the last class that shows you what is GZ. In that cross section of a ship, when you draw a cross section of a ship, it's heeling, waterline heeling and all that, and you you have to know what is the writing arm in that. Means you have to know how to plot the writing arm GZ in that. Means what is G, what is Z, you should know. G of course you know, but Z you should be knowing. That is very important. Then in that, this is the restoring or writing arm. Writing arm is the restoring arm. Okay. And other than that, the other arm that comes is the wind healing arm. It actually looks like this. Something like this. Almost like a constant line, but it goes down a little. It goes down, it just goes down a little. This is usually written as LV. The healing arm is written as LV. This is the wind healing arm. So delta into LV will give you the healing moment. This will give you the healing moment. So basically when it looks like this, you can see two things. The curve healing arm, the curve of healing moment, let's put it here. One delta also here, and this is delta LV, let's say. This curve is delta LV, not LV. So basically this is a curve of healing moment and phi, the heel angle. So as you can see, the restoring moment and the healing moment coincide at 2 points, here and here. Okay. So at this point and at this point, so these are points where healing moment is equal to the restoring moment. Now let us look at the two healing moments. It means these are actually, so whenever healing moment is equal to restoring moment, you can see that there is some kind of an equilibrium. Whether it's a stable equilibrium or unstable equilibrium, we cannot say, but there is an equilibrium. So these two are 2 points of equilibrium. 1, 2. So these 2 points are 2 points of equilibrium in the ship's healing. In the ship's healing history, it's according to the GZ. These are 2 points of equilibrium. Now let us take a look at the equilibrium 1. Let us take a look at equilibrium 1. Now equilibrium 1 says that the healing arm, this is the healing arm, okay, the healing arm is equal to the writing arm, okay, at that point. So the two of them cancel each other, and so the system is in equilibrium. Now let us suppose that we increase the heel. That means from this point I go in this direction, which means I increase the heel. I increase the heel of the ship. And as you do that, when you go to this direction, you see that when you go in this direction, this one is the healing arm. I am writing HA, and this one is the restoring arm. I am writing RA. You can see that at this point, as the heel increases, RA is greater than HA. You can see RA is greater than HA. As you can see, just look at the values and see. So when RA is less than HA, greater than HA, it means that restoring arm is more than the healing arm, which means that ship has a tendency to come back to its original position. So this spot actually represents a position of stable equilibrium. Stable equilibrium. So that we know now. Now let us take a look at the other side. Okay, this point. Now this point also, you see that healing arm, this is the healing arm, is equal to the writing arm. Okay, the healing arm is equal to the writing arm again. Therefore, this is also a point of equilibrium. But as the healing increases, why did I say this is the point of unstable equilibrium? Stable equilibrium, it means as the heel increases, means the ship heals more, it tends to come back. So it is stable equilibrium. In this case, when you go in this direction, this is the direction where the heel increases. When the ship heals more, when it heel increases, you see that the heeling arm curve is above the righting arm curve. At this point, they cross each other by this point, and heeling arm curve is greater than the righting arm curve. So at that point, heeling arm greater than righting arm curve means the ship is in unstable equilibrium. What it means, heeling arm is more, so it will keep on heeling and it will go and collapse. It will go and overturn completely. So this is known as the position of unstable. This position is known as a position of unstable equilibrium. Unstable equilibrium. It's known as a position of unstable equilibrium. So in this curve, GZ curve, therefore, when we study it, we should know that there are two places in which this curve, you just remember it, okay? It's the heeling arm curve due to wind. The wind heeling arm curve looks like this. I am coming to that. We will see what it depends upon and all that. But it can be seen that usually there will be 2 points of equilibrium, of which one will be a point of stable equilibrium and the other one will be a point of unstable equilibrium. The thing is at equilibrium, but it is in an unstable equilibrium. Okay. Now let us go into wind heeling arm. Now let us consider a ship like this. Okay, this is a cross section of a ship. This is a cross section. This is its water line. Then, so initially here you have the center line. Center line didn't come properly. So let's say this is the center line. And then let us assume that at this point a force Fv acts. Fv. This is the wind force. Okay, the wind force. What is the magnitude of the wind force and all? I'll tell you later. But a wind force acts. Let's say it acts at this area which is exposed to wind. The area exposed to wind is known as the sail area. So we can assume that the net force due to the wind acts at the centroid of the sail area. Okay, centroid of sail area. By the way, do you remember what is the area that is exposed to water called? Somebody? No. So nobody knows that. It is known as wetted surface area. Wetted surface area, not required here, but it just came up when I wetted surface area. So when I am saying this comes for the water. This area that is completely touched by the water, you know, that part is known as the wetted surface area. Okay, this is not required here. So basically we are dealing with the wind. We are only interested in what happens above this mainly. Okay, so the wind force is acting as Fv at the centroid of the sail area like this. It is acting, let us say, at a distance hv from the center, from the free surface, and then you will know that if there is a ship like this and something is trying to push it, obviously the water will try to stop it. Water will try to resist that motion. So when water tries to resist that motion, it produces a reaction force. So the reaction force will act here. Reaction force R will act at the reaction force will act at the center of buoyancy, will act exactly at the center of buoyancy, which will be basically, let's assume, half the draft. The center of buoyancy is usually at half the draft, no? Let us assume it is. So the reaction force acts here. Now when the ship is heeled, Okay, then FV acts like this. Okay, I think I should draw. No, I'll take a different pen. FV will act like this. Okay, because we are only interested in the force in this direction. See, this is the perpendicular. This is
So I have a doubt. So where is the centroid of the sail area?
What is the centroid of the sail area?
Yes, sir. So I missed that part because of the network
See,
issue.
any area can have a centroid, right? The center where the net, see, if you have a surface, let's say a blackboard, just consider, just a simple example, in a blackboard where wind is blowing very hard, okay, and wind magnitude, for instance, I'm just giving you a more complicated case. Wind magnitude is, for instance, different at different points on the board. It's a complete wind acting. So when we take the position into the value of the wind force at that point and plus for all the points and divided by the net force, you will get the position of the wind, position of the centroid. You got it?
Yeah, yes.
So something
So
like that.
what you have written below FV?
Below FV,
V.
HV, this one,
HV, okay.
HV is this distance. Let's say it's a distance is HV. So basically, when this thing is at an angle, you will have FV acting here, let's say, and the reaction force acting here somewhere. So this distance becomes the required distance. So this will be basically, first of all, FV fully won't act. Only FV cos phi will, because we want only the force that is perpendicular to the sail area. Okay, we are taking only the force perpendicular. So when it is inclined like this, the force, we need only this force or this force in this case. Sorry. So in this force, in this case, the ship is tilting like this. If it tilts like this, then it's in this direction. Okay. Then, so the force itself is Fv cos theta, and the distance between the force Fv, that is the wind force, and the reaction force from the water, this distance is Hv plus T by 2 cos theta, cos phi. This distance is Hv, this distance is T by 2, so this distance is Hv plus T by 2, and this distance is Hv plus T by 2. This distance is the perpendicular distance between the two forces, which is Hv plus T by 2 cos phi. I think this is phi, or this one. One of them is phi, okay? I think this is phi. So this is phi. So Hv plus T by 2 cos phi. This is the distance between them. So the net wind moment will be Fv cos phi into Hv plus T by 2 cos phi. Now, this is the wind heeling moment. Sorry, it's not the arm, it's the wind heeling moment. So, delta into LV, right. LV is the wind heeling arm. So, this is equal to FV into HV plus T by 2 into cos square phi. Now, I'll just take the delta to this side and put L here. LV is equal to this. Now, I'm not going into this, but just quickly we'll see that FV, which is the force due to the wind, is usually given as PV into AV, okay, where P is the pressure due to the wind, pressure generated due to the wind, and A is the area. Okay, what this area is, that area is the wind, that area is the FV. So this is the area that becomes A cos phi. As a result of F becoming F cos phi, that is because of the area becoming cos phi. So PV into AV. Now PV is given by, you will see this is meteorology, in which you will define what are the wind forces and all that. Meteorology is another, as you probably wouldn't have come across, but it's another branch of closely related to our own. So usually we calculate the pressure due to the wind. Pressure due to the wind is given as half Cw rho Vw squared, where Vw is the velocity of the wind, rho is the density of air. CW is a constant which has a value of, it says, CW has a value between 1.36. It depends upon the place, I think, and 1.0. So somewhere it depends on the place and some other conditions and all that. But usually you have the CW around 1. Usually it is taken as 1.2. So if you don't know anything, you just take CW as 1.2. So once you have CW, you have PV. The pressure due to the wind is half CW rho VW squared, where V is the velocity of the wind. Then force is equal to PV AV. AV is the area here, and PV is we have calculated. AV is known as the sail area, as I told you. That is the area over which the wind is acting normally. That is the sail area. So that is one thing. So this is basically how so the only main thing you have to remember here is that the wind heeling arm is basically proportional to cos square phi. When it heels like this, it depends upon cos square phi. So it kind of, when you put cos square phi as the parameter, it kind of looks like this. Like this actually. Not very different, but slight like this. This is why we had, the GZ curve like this and the wind heeling arm curve like this, and it has 2 points. So the rest of it is okay. So that is how it works. Then we need to figure out what is the heeling arm in turning. That is much easier. Yes. So the heeling arm due to turning actually there are many heeling arms. Since the course is only 1 semester, we don't do it, but you can have, if you have grain in a vessel and it keeps going, we have all that in the book. We won't be covering. So when you are studying, if you have the enthusiasm, of course, study the whole thing, but what I am teaching will be only maybe about 3/4 of it. I will in this, to take some 1/4 of it, I'll be leaving. So I won't be taking that. So, but you read that if you can. Some of it is things like these things. Heeling arm due to grains. When there are grains on how does it go? Angle of repose. Things like that. It all basically depends on how you work. See, many of you who want to stay in the core job, what we the basic naval architecture jobs, will be taking jobs in mainly Indian Register of Shipping. I told you yesterday. One of the primary recruiters in our department is Indian Register of Shipping. They take every year. They take MTech and BTech. The problem is this: they are not very happy with BTechs because they don't stick in the company. So at any rate, what you will be doing in IRS when you are doing, you need to know all these hydrostatics and stability very well. So IRS, and another thing is ABS, American Bureau of Shipping comes, then the other one I can't get the name, but so a few of these classification societies are basically your goals when you apply for jobs. But and I'm talking about only those who wants to stick to the core job, which most of you usually, you're only second year, you have probably not decided anything now, but usually we will most likely go into some machine language, or what is it called, artificial intelligence, machine language, and things like that. Very few people stick to the job. So basically these things, if you are studying, you read the whole book. It's very useful. So heeling arm due to turning. So let us deal with the heeling arm due to turning. So basically the force due to turning, you will be knowing, if anything goes in a circle, the force due to that will be mv square by r. The centrifugal force is given by mv square by r. So here you have m, delta, the weight of the ship, v square velocity of turning. It is the velocity with which the ship is turning by r. Now it's usually written like this, RTC, where RTC represents the radius of the turning circle. Radius of the turning circle. Okay, so this is basically how the force is calculated. Then in this thing there are, so basically in this case there are two forces. One is when the ship turns, it experiences the centrifugal force, and it experiences a centrifugal force which causes it to move, okay, which pushes it to move in a direction, and the water opposes it. So obviously there is a reaction force on the water which will be equal in magnitude. It should be, as long as it doesn't slide and all that, which doesn't happen. It should be equal in magnitude to the centrifugal force. Okay, centrifugal force and the reaction force will be and they'll act at this 2 point. The reaction force will act at the center of buoyancy. This you should remember. Okay, the reaction force is basically the force from water. Anything from water acts on the volume, underwater volume. So it acts at the center of buoyancy. Whereas the other force, centrifugal force, the centrifugal force will act at the centroid. It's center of gravity actually. Whether it is a vehicle at land or whether it's a vehicle in the ocean, it is basically that these centripetal force and centrifugal force, centripetal force, all those forces will act at the center of gravity of the vessel. So it will be like this. So the moment. So the moment due to the turning circle will be v square by RTC. This is the force, delta into v square by RTC into the lever. Okay, the distance between the two forces, which is kg minus t by 2 cos phi. Cos phi comes because of just the same reason. In this case, the difference is in same reason as we said for the wind. In this case, the difference is that the force doesn't get a cos phi. So there is only one cos phi here. That is coming from the lever. If you want to know how it comes from the lever, just look at that figure in the textbook. It's very easy. I don't want to draw it. It's what I just drew. In fact, what I just drew, that tells you how in that case hv plus t by 2 became hv plus t by 2 cos phi. Just like that, you will see that here it becomes kg minus t by 2. It will be like this. I should draw it. Let's see if I can make sense out of it. So let's assume this. So when it is turning, g will be somewhere here. Somewhere here is g, and let us say this is. So what will happen is that g will act at g, kg. This is kg, and this will be b. So this will be t by 2, and this will be t by 2. So this t by 2. So kg minus t by 2 will give you the distance between the force acting. So the force will be acting like this. It's becoming worse and worse. Like this. At kg, at g, the force will act like this, and here at b, the force will act like this. Here you will have the centrifugal force acting, and at this point you have the reaction force acting, and the distance between them is this, which will be kg. It will be like this. So this distance is what we want, which will be kg minus t by 2 into cos phi. That I think you should. That is how you. I think you should have got it by now. So kg minus t by 2 into cos phi. That will give you the lever, and as a result, the force into lever will give you the total moment. So this is the moment due to turning, and the lever due to turning, LTC, The lever due to turning will be this divided by the delta. Delta will go, so it will become V square by RTC into kg minus T by 2 into cos phi. So what I would like you to do is to remember that the wind heeling arm is proportional to cos square phi, and the turning moment or the turning lever is proportional to cos phi. So one is cos square phi, one is cos phi. Because in one it comes twice, the cos phi comes twice. That is more or less this part. Now we go into something else. Okay, then you will be knowing that there is a Newton's equation of motion. There is a Newton's equation of motion which says F equals ma, very simple, F equals ma equation. But there is also an equation which says that the torque produced or the moment is equal to I alpha. Same equation. It says that the moment, the book uses the word J. It is I, we usually say for moment of inertia, mass moment of inertia. So but the book says it as J, so I'll follow the book. J alpha, where alpha is the acceleration, angular acceleration. This is just the equation F equals ma, okay? So F equals ma when it is turned into the rotating. This is for translation. When it is turned into the rotating system, for a rotating body, you are going to have moment is equal to J alpha. This is the angular acceleration. Angular acceleration. Okay. Then, so once you have this, a little bit of manipulation we are going to do. So this is J into d square phi by dt square. This is alpha plus G delta Gz. Let me write this in a different form. Maybe it will be very more appealing to you. Sorry. Okay. Now, basically, let me write this first, then I'll tell you. GO is equal to plus G delta Gz is equal to mh, healing moment. What does this say? This says that the net moment, what is the net moment? The net moment is the healing moment minus the righting moment. So that is the moment that produces acceleration. So if healing moment is equal to the righting moment, then there is an equilibrium, which we saw in the figure. We saw that there were 2 points of equilibrium where the healing moment and the righting moment were equal. In the other points where the healing moment and righting moments are not equal, you will have the healing moment minus the righting moment. This is the righting moment is equal. Actually, there is a slide to this thing. This G is unnecessary here, but the book, because actually they have now converted everything into weight. That is why this till now we considered mass. They have now converted into all metric system. So it becomes, that's why the G comes. Let it be there. Doesn't matter. J d square phi by dt square plus G delta Gz is equal to mh. So basically, you will get. So let us rewrite it as little. Let us multiply this, the whole thing, by d phi. So J d square phi by dt square d phi plus G delta Gz d phi equals mh d phi. Okay. Then now let us take this term alone. This term is d square phi by dt square into d phi equals d phi by d phi dot by dt. You understand what that is, no? Phi dot is d phi by dt. It is written as d phi by dt, d by dt of d phi by dt, which is d square phi by dt square, same thing as this. D phi dot by dt into d phi, which is equal to d phi dot. This is just manipulation. I'm not doing anything. Nothing new is being done by d. Just to get something very clearly, into d phi by d phi into d phi by dt into d phi is equal to d phi dot by d phi. So d phi by dt is phi. So what does this become? This becomes phi dot d phi dot. This is phi dot. So this d phi and d phi, if I cancel, then this is phi dot. D phi by dt is phi dot, and this is d phi dot. So I write the expression in this fashion. This whole thing, this first term, this first term is therefore j into phi dot d phi dot. So let us write the terms again after this manipulation. So you will get the expression becomes j. We are integrating between an initial phi and a final phi. So initial phi, let us call it as phi 0, and the final phi is called as some phi itself. So phi into phi dot d phi dot. This was the first term. We just manipulated it into this, plus g delta into integral phi dot to phi gz d phi. Usually gz is written like this, it doesn't matter, is equal to phi dot to phi mh d phi. Therefore half j phi dot squared at phi 0 by doing this integration. This becomes phi square by phi dot squared by 2. So this becomes into phi 0 minus phi dot squared at phi, at phi minus phi 0, isn't it? Not here. This is phi minus phi 0 plus g delta into integral of gz d phi equals integral of mh d phi. Therefore half. Now basically, what is this? We say that half mv square is equal to kinetic energy. Okay, the translational kinetic energy. Similarly, this is half j phi dot squared. Phi dot, as you know, is the angular velocity omega. So this is actually half I omega squared, which is basically the kinetic energy, rotational kinetic energy. So this represents the rotational kinetic energy. rotational kinetic energy plus G plus, let's combine these two. So let us say that rotational kinetic energy is equal to this integral mh minus G delta Gz into d phi. So we get that the rotational kinetic energy is equal to this. Now, when the rotational kinetic energy is a maximum, 1 minute. Potential energy is minimum. Okay. So basically, in the case of an equilibrium, you will have the potential energy as the minimum. Okay. This is basically basic principle. When the system is in equilibrium, the potential energy is minimum. Potential energy is minimum is also equivalent to being considered that the kinetic energy is maximum. Therefore, all those points where the kinetic energy is maximum in this equation represent the points of stable equilibrium. I won't say stable or unstable. It's a position of equilibrium. It produces equations of equilibrium, and let us see what those. That means when rotational kinetic energy is maximum when, let's say, so dke by d phi is 0, and when d square ke by d phi square is it greater than 0 or minimum? Less than 0. Less than 0, I think. Less than 0. Then you have this thing as maximum. This is the condition for maximum rotational kinetic energy. Maximum rotational kinetic energy. These two conditions. Now you just check and see what these two conditions are. Basically, this is the the rotational kinetic energy is equal to this. So let's take this. This says that the dke by d phi should be 0. So d by d phi of this should be 0. That means the integral goes, you should get mh equals G delta Gz. So what does this say? This says that the healing moment must be equal to the righting moment. So when you are having an equilibrium, it says that the healing moment must be equal to the righting moment. That is the first condition that you straight away get from this. And it says that mh, the second condition states that d square will be d, let me write it properly. So the first condition, which said dke by d phi equal to 0, implies that the kinetic energy is maximum when dke by d phi equal to 0. Kinetic energy is maximum or minimum when dke by d phi equal to 0, and it is a maximum when d square ke by d phi square is less than 0. Okay, so this is the condition for d square ke by when the kinetic energy is maximum. So let me see, I am getting confused here. So dke by d phi equal to 0 is the first condition. Okay, that says that mh should be equal to G delta Gz. We are just equating the right hand side to 0. So we just equated this right side, which is basically, how will you get dke by d phi? You have the expression for ke here. So d by dt of that you do. D by dt of kinetic energy, if you do, you will get the right hand side. D by dt of this integral you will get. So integral and derivative will go, and you will get mh is equal to G delta Gz, which will imply that the healing moment, this is the first condition for an equilibrium. And the second condition is that the kinetic energy should be the maximum. This will imply when this thing is less than d by d phi of mh should be less than G d by of the G delta Gz, or D. Now this is the interesting part. What does this mean really? Can anyone tell me what this means really? So there are two possibilities for this, okay? One is that the dmh by d phi can be greater than this. Case 2, dmh by d phi can be less than this. Both occurring under the same, both can occur under the same condition. Mh is equal to G delta Gz. So Mh equal to G delta Gz implies that the healing moment and the writing moment are equal, which means that you have a position of equilibrium. That's all. Now, when this is less than, when dmh, remember the figure. So this one, this condition, this condition, which is that dmh by d phi should be less than d by d phi of G delta Gz. Now what does this mean? This is your statical stability curve. This is phi and this is delta Gz. Delta Gz. And this is your healing arm curve. Okay. Now let us take this position of equilibrium. At this position of equilibrium, let us see d by d phi of mh. This is mh. This is mh. D by d phi, as phi increases, mh. Okay. The change in mh. And this is d by d phi of G. So as phi increases, you see that this one is bigger than this one as phi increases. Okay, that means this one is above this, as a result of which the restoring arm is more. Okay, in this case, this is the restoring arm. So the restoring moment or restoring moment exceeds the writing moment. I hope you are following it. Otherwise, you just sit and read through this. This is from Adrian Beran. Which chapter is this? I'll tell you. It's not difficult, but it's I don't know. Let's see. It's sixth chapter. Okay. So this one. Whereas, so what we are seeing here is d by d phi of mh. This is mh. Mh is less than d by d phi of this thing, which is Gz, G delta Gz. So that means this region is actually a stable equilibrium. This point represents a stable equilibrium. Whereas at this point, as d by d phi means when you are going to the right, as the phi keeps increasing. That is what d by d phi means. Okay, when the phi keeps increasing. So when the phi keeps increasing here, in this case, you have G delta Gz, this is G delta Gz is greater than the MH, is less than, if it is less than the MH, and when that happens, this is the unstable equilibrium. Just equilibrium. Here, as we go, as the phi increases, this fellow is smaller than this fellow, which implies that it is unstable equilibrium. So when this is true, it is a condition of stable equilibrium, and when this is happening, it is a condition of unstable equilibrium. So this condition tells you it is an equilibrium, and this condition tells you it's a stable equilibrium. So this condition is required for the system to be in stable equilibrium. This condition is required for the system to be in equilibrium. And if this is greater than 0, it is an unstable equilibrium. This is what I've been trying to put forward. Okay, so this chapter is more or less done, and there is actually a little bit more. I'll continue in the next class. I think I'll stop here today. We are quite comfortable in our portions and all. We have very little left. Some flooding, a bit of trimming left. We can finish it very quickly. After the puja, we will finish it off. By November middle, we will finish. So today, I don't think I need the second class. So first class with it, I'll stop it. Okay, so